The last real conversation I had with my father happened on a rainy Tuesday night. I still remember standing outside my apartment building, holding groceries in one hand while trying to keep my phone dry with the other. Dad laughed when I complained about working overtime again. "You always work too hard," he said warmly. "But I'm proud of you." Those were the last honest words I heard from him for almost 2 years. At first, the change was small. He stopped calling every evening, then his replies became shorter. "Busy, talk later. Your mother says you're doing fine. Take care." I told myself he was tired. Dad had been struggling with heart problems for years, and my mother always said stress made his condition worse. I didn't want to pressure him, but something felt wrong. Every time I tried to visit home, Mom had an excuse. "Your father is sleeping. He's too weak today," the doctor said, no excitement. At first, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother. Then came my cousin Rachel's wedding. The moment I entered the reception hall, conversations stopped around me. A few relatives whispered while staring openly. My Uncle David barely shook my hand. Aunt Nina looked disgusted. I felt like I had walked into the wrong building. When I finally found my father sitting near the stage, relief flooded my chest. He looked thinner than before, his shoulders weaker, his smile faded. I rushed toward him. "Dad," his expression changed instantly. Cold, hard, disappointed. He stood up slowly and said something that nearly stopped my heart. "You actually came." The room went silent. I stared at him, confused. What does that mean? Before he could answer, my mother appeared beside him like she had been waiting for the moment. "Don't start drama here," she snapped quietly. "Drama?" I looked back at Dad. "What's going on?" He avoided my eyes. That hurt more than yelling would have. Then my aunt stepped forward with crossed arms. "Your father is sick, and you only visit when people are watching." I blinked in disbelief. "What?" Another relative joined in. "Your mother told us you haven't cared about this family in years." I laughed nervously because it sounded insane. "I call every week." "No, you don't." Mom interrupted sharply. "Yes, I do." Dad finally spoke again, but his voice was filled with bitterness. "You only contact us when you need money." The words hit like a slap. "Dad, I've never asked you for money." He looked away. My chest tightened painfully. Something was terribly wrong, but I couldn't understand what. Mom placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, playing the role of the loving wife perfectly. "Please leave," she whispered to me. "You're upsetting him." I looked around the room desperately, hoping someone would defend me. Nobody did. 30 people I had grown up loving stared at me like I was a selfish stranger. I left the wedding fighting tears so hard I nearly crashed my car driving home. That night, I checked my phone again and again. No calls, no messages, only silence. Over the next few months, things became worse. Relatives stopped inviting me to birthdays and holidays. Family group chats suddenly disappeared from my phone. Even cousins I grew up with ignored my texts. Every road led back to my mother. Whenever I tried contacting Dad directly, she answered instead. "He doesn't want to talk right now. He's resting. He's disappointed in you." That last sentence destroyed me slowly, because no matter how much I replayed my memories, I couldn't understand what I had done wrong. Then one night, my younger cousin Liam secretly called me. "You need to know something," he whispered nervously. "What?" "Aunt Carol has been telling everyone you refused to help pay for Uncle's treatments." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? I sent money 3 different times." "I know," Liam said quietly, "but nobody else knows that." My stomach twisted. Suddenly, every strange look and cruel comment made sense. Mom was lying, but why? I confronted her the next morning. She answered calmly, almost too calmly. "You always make yourself the victim. Why are you telling people I abandoned Dad? You abandoned this family the moment you moved away." I moved 3 hours away for work. You chose your career over your father." Her voice remained smooth and controlled while mine cracked with emotion. That was her gift. She could sound gentle while destroying someone from the inside. "You're turning him against me," I whispered. "No," she replied coldly. "You did that yourself." Then she hung up. Weeks later, I received the call that changed everything. Dad was dying, severe complications. The doctors weren't hopeful anymore. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. I packed a bag immediately and drove through the night, praying I still had time to fix whatever had been broken between us. But deep down, fear sat heavily in my chest, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure my father wanted to see me at all. I reached the hospital just after sunrise. The parking lot was crowded with cars belonging to relatives I hadn't seen in months. My stomach tightened the moment I stepped out. Somehow, I already knew this wouldn't be peaceful. The automatic doors slid open, and the sharp smell of disinfectant hit me instantly. Nurses rushed through the halls, while tired families sat quietly in waiting areas, clutching coffee cups and bad news. I walked toward the intensive care unit with shaking hands. Dad was somewhere behind those walls, maybe dying, maybe asking for me, or maybe still believing every lie my mother had fed him. I tried not to think about that last possibility. Near the ICU entrance, I spotted several relatives gathered together. The second they noticed me, conversation stopped. Again, the silence felt heavier this time. Aunt Nina looked irritated. Uncle David sighed loudly like my presence alone exhausted him. Two cousins exchanged uncomfortable glances. Then my mother stood up slowly from her chair. Her face hardened immediately. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. My throat tightened. "I came to see Dad." "You've done enough damage already. I just want to talk to him. He doesn't need stress right now." I stared at her in disbelief. "I'm his child. And now you remember that." A few relatives muttered under their breath. My cheeks burned with humiliation. I lowered my voice. "Please, I don't want to fight." But Mom wasn't interested in peace. She stepped closer so everyone could hear. "You disappear for 2 years, ignore your dying father, then suddenly show up when the doctors say he may not survive the week. That's not true." I snapped. "It is true." Aunt Nina added coldly. I looked around desperately. "You all seriously believe that?" Uncle David crossed his arms. "Carol told us everything." Of course she did. Mom's eyes filled with fake tears at perfect timing. "Your father cried for months, wondering why his own child stopped loving him." That sentence cut deeper than anything else she'd ever said, because it sounded exactly like something Dad would believe. I felt anger rise inside my chest, but underneath it was heartbreak. Crushing, unbearable heartbreak. "I never stopped loving him," I whispered. Mom looked away dramatically as if she couldn't bear hearing my lies. Then the ICU door opened. A doctor stepped outside holding a clipboard. "Family of Richard Bennett." Everyone rushed forward at once. I stayed frozen. The doctor explained Dad's condition had worsened overnight. His heart was failing faster than expected. They didn't know how much time remained. My mother immediately burst into tears and buried her face in Uncle David's shoulder. I barely heard anything after that. All I could think was, I might lose my father today. Before anyone could stop me, I slipped past the group and walked directly into the ICU hallway. "Hey," Mom shouted behind me. I ignored her. Dad's room was near the end of the corridor. Machines beeped softly inside while pale morning light filtered through the blinds. And there he was. The strongest man I'd ever known suddenly looked small and fragile beneath white hospital blankets. His skin looked gray. His breathing sounded painful. For a second, I couldn't move. Then I quietly stepped closer. "Dad," his eyes opened slowly. For one brief moment, I saw recognition. then confusion, then anger. "You came," he said weakly. My chest tightened. Of course I came. He stared at the ceiling instead of me. "Your mother said you were too busy. I tried to visit so many times." His jaw tightened slightly. "You stopped calling." "No, Dad, I didn't. You only care now because I'm dying." The words shattered something inside me. Tears filled my eyes instantly. "That's not true." He coughed painfully before speaking again. "You left this family behind." I shook my head desperately. "Please listen to me. Mom lied to you." The second those words left my mouth, the door slammed open. Mom stormed inside furiously. "How dare you?" she yelled. Nurses turned toward the noise immediately. "She's confusing him," Mom cried dramatically. "Richard, don't listen to this stress right now." Dad looked exhausted, overwhelmed. I stepped back helplessly. "I'm just trying to tell him the truth. The truth." Mom laughed bitterly. "Now you care about truth." Then she delivered the final blow in front of everyone. "You didn't even send money for his treatment until relatives started asking questions." My eyes widened in disbelief. "That's a lie. Stop shouting at your mother." Uncle David barked from the doorway. "I sent money." Dad closed his eyes tightly, like the argument physically hurt him. A heart monitor began beeping faster. Nurses rushed in immediately. "You all need to step outside now." One ordered firmly. Mom instantly pointed at me. "This is exactly why he didn't want you here." I felt completely powerless. As they pushed us into the hallway, Dad weakly turned his head toward me. His lips moved slightly. At first, I thought he was telling me to leave. Then I noticed something else in his expression. Fear, not anger, fear. Like he wanted to say more but couldn't. The ICU doors shut between us, and for the first time, doubt crept into my mind. What if my father wasn't just manipulated? What if he'd been controlled? 20 minutes later, while I sat alone near the vending machines trying not to fall apart, a nurse approached quietly. "Are you Richard's child?" she asked softly. I nodded. She looked around carefully before slipping a small sealed envelope into my hand. "He asked me to hide this yesterday," she whispered. My heart stopped. "What is it?" The nurse hesitated. Then she said the words that changed everything. "He told me not to let your mother see it." My hands shook as I stared at the sealed envelope. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. The nurse gave me a sympathetic look before quietly walking away down the hallway, leaving me alone beside the humming vending machines. I turned the envelope over carefully. My name was written across the front in my father's handwriting. Not my mother's, not anyone else's, Dad's. The sight alone nearly broke me. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded letter and a small flash drive taped to the paper. Confused, I unfolded the letter first. The handwriting looked shaky, uneven, like he'd struggled to write every word. "If you're reading this, your mother doesn't know I gave this to you." My pulse quickened. Something hasn't felt right for a long time. Every time I asked why you stopped calling, your mother always had answers. But recently I discovered messages on an old tablet she forgot to remove. I swallowed hard. I don't know what's true anymore. Tears blurred my vision instantly. The letter continued. "If I was wrong about you, I'm sorry." A tear slipped down my cheek. For 2 years, I had replayed every memory wondering what I did to deserve losing my father. Now I realized something horrifying. Maybe he had been trapped in the lies too. At the bottom of the page, Dad had written one final sentence. "The recordings are on the drive. Listen carefully." I immediately rushed to my car. My laptop was still inside my travel bag on the back seat. My fingers trembled violently as I plugged in the flash drive. There were dozens of audio files. Some were labeled with dates. Others simply said, "Recording 1, Recording 2. I clicked the first one. At first, there was only static. Then my mother's voice filled the speakers, cold, sharp, manipulative. She called again today. Mom said. Dad's weaker voice answered. Did she leave a message? No. Mom lied smoothly. She just asked whether the insurance papers were finalized. My stomach dropped. I had never asked about insurance once. Dad sounded heartbroken. I don't understand how our child changed this much. Mom sighed dramatically. Some people only care about money. I covered my mouth in shock. The next recording was worse. She sent flowers. Dad said quietly. Mom laughed under her breath. I threw them away. Silence. Then Dad asked softly, Why would you do that? Because she's pretending now. Don't fall for it. My chest felt like it was being crushed. I clicked through more recordings. Every single one exposed another lie. Mom hid my birthday cards, deleted my voicemails, blocked my number from Dad's phone. She even told relatives I refused to help pay medical bills while secretly depositing the money I sent into her own account. But the final recording destroyed me completely. Dad sounded exhausted, emotionally drained. I miss my child, he whispered. Mom's response came instantly. If you keep defending someone who abandoned you, then maybe you deserve the pain. I froze. Even Dad went silent after that. For 2 years, she hadn't just manipulated him. She had emotionally tortured him. And suddenly, everything made sense. The fear in his eyes, the hesitation, the sadness beneath the anger. He wasn't sure what to believe anymore. By evening, relatives had gathered at my parents' house after hearing Dad might not survive the night. 31 family members filled the living room, kitchen, and dining area. The atmosphere felt heavy with grief and tension. And right in the center of it all sat my mother, accepting sympathy like a grieving saint. When I walked through the front door, conversations stopped instantly. Mom looked furious. You have nerve showing up here again. I didn't answer. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't afraid anymore. I walked calmly to the center of the room holding my laptop. Uncle David stood up immediately. This isn't the time. No, I said quietly. Actually, it is. Mom narrowed her eyes. What are you doing? I looked around at every face in the room. These past 2 years, all of you believed I abandoned my father. Nobody spoke. You believed I ignored him, used him, stopped loving him. Aunt Nina crossed her arms defensively. Because that's what we were told, she replied. I nodded slowly, exactly. Then I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room instantly. She only cares about inheritance. The room went silent. Every relative froze. Mom's face lost color immediately. I played another recording. I threw the flowers away. Then another. She sent money again. I moved it into the other account. Gasps spread across the room. Uncle David stared at Mom in disbelief. Carol, what is this? Mom stood abruptly. She edited those. But then Dad's exhausted voice echoed through the speakers. I miss my child. Nobody could fake that pain. I watched the room change in real time. Shock, confusion, horror, then anger. Years of lies were collapsing within minutes. Aunt Nina slowly covered her mouth with trembling hands. You told us she never called, she whispered. Mom panicked instantly. She's manipulating all of you. But nobody was listening anymore. Because I played the final recording, the cruelest one of all. If you keep defending someone who abandoned you, then maybe you deserve the pain. Complete silence followed. Heavy, ugly, unavoidable. Then Uncle David looked at my mother with disgust I had never seen before. You did this to him, he asked quietly. One by one, relatives began stepping away from her. 31 people who once turned against me now stared at her like they no longer recognized the woman standing before them. And within less than 1 hour, My mother lost every single one of them. The room felt suffocating after the final recording ended. Nobody moved, nobody defended her. For the first time in my life, my mother stood completely alone. The same relatives who once attacked me now stared at her with shock and disgust. Some looked angry. Others looked heartbroken. A few couldn't even meet my eyes anymore. Uncle David stepped backward slowly like he needed distance from her. "You made us hate our own family," he said quietly. Mom's breathing became uneven. "You're all overreacting." Overreacting? Aunt Nina snapped. Tears filled her eyes as she pointed toward my laptop. "Richard spent his final years emotionally destroyed because of you." Mom immediately switched tactics, just like she always did. She began crying. "I was trying to protect him," she shouted desperately. "You don't understand how difficult those years were for me." But this time, nobody rushed to comfort her. Nobody believed her tears anymore. One cousin angrily grabbed his coat and walked out. Then another relative followed. Soon the entire room erupted into arguments and disbelief. "How long were you lying? You stole the money. You kept them apart on purpose." Every question chipped away at the perfect image she had spent years building. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I only felt tired, so unbelievably tired, because none of this could give me back the 2 years I lost with my father. Suddenly my phone rang. The hospital. My heart dropped instantly. I answered with trembling hands. The doctor's voice was gentle. "You should come now." That was all he needed to say. The drive back to the hospital felt endless. Rain hammered against the windshield while silence filled the car. None of the relatives who came with me spoke a single word. When we arrived, the ICU hallway looked darker somehow. Quieter, a nurse guided me toward Dad's room. "He's awake," she whispered softly, but weak. I stepped inside slowly. Dad looked fragile beneath the blankets, his breathing shallow and uneven. The machines beside him beeped steadily, each sound reminding me how little time remained. His eyes opened when he heard me approach. This time there was no anger in them, only sadness and regret. I moved closer to the bed carefully. "Dad," his lips trembled slightly. "You heard them?" he asked weakly. I nodded. A tear rolled down the side of his face. I didn't know what to believe anymore. He whispered painfully, "Every day she told me you stopped caring." My throat tightened so badly I could barely speak. "I never stopped loving you." Dad closed his eyes briefly like the words physically hurt him. I know that now. The room fell silent except for the heart monitor. Then he slowly reached toward the bedside drawer. Inside was another envelope. "For you," he whispered. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The ink looked messy in places, almost blurred, like tears had fallen onto the page while he wrote it. "To my child, if you are reading this." Then I probably ran out of time to fix the damage I helped create. My vision blurred immediately. I was weak, confused, sick. But none of that excuses the pain I caused you. I should have trusted your heart instead of listening to fear and manipulation. I wiped tears from my face while continuing. "Please don't let hatred become your future. That would only continue the destruction." I looked up at Dad. He watched me quietly with exhausted eyes. "You deserved better from me," he whispered. I grabbed his hand carefully. "No, you were hurting too." His fingers weakly squeezed mine. Then, for the first time in 2 years, my father smiled at me again. "Small, tired, but real. I'm proud of you," he whispered, the exact words he told me on that rainy Tuesday night years ago. And just like that, something broken inside me finally began healing. Dad passed away early the next morning. Peacefully, I cried harder than I ever had in my life, but strangely not with anger anymore. The funeral was nothing like my mother expected. Relatives avoided her completely. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. People who once defended her now refused to even sit beside her. Meanwhile, family members approached me one after another with apologies. Aunt Nina hugged me tightly through tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Uncle David couldn't even look me in the eyes when he apologized. The truth had destroyed my mother's reputation in a single night. But my real revenge wasn't watching her lose everyone. It was what happened after. Months later, I rebuilt relationships with relatives who genuinely regretted believing the lies. I started therapy. I returned to work. Slowly, life became lighter again. And my mother, she ended up isolated inside the very loneliness she created for me and Dad. No family gatherings, no trust, no control, just silence. But Dad's final words stayed with me. Don't let hatred become your future. So I didn't. I moved forward. I healed. And in the end, that became the one thing my mother could never destroy.